Hi, my name's Kazra. I've been a programmer for around 10 years now, and I'm here to tell you some tips and tricks on how to enter the tech scene. I've met a lot of people who have gone through some sort of formal education, who have gone to school, gotten a degree, who have learned to code school, have gone to boot camp, and learned about the skills that people are hiring for in the tech scene. But after you've learned those skills, what? What do you do? How do you get your first job? That's what I'm here to talk to you about. It should come as no surprise to anyone that a lot of tech jobs are paying a lot of money to a lot of people to do a lot of stuff. But there's a big slump where a lot of people are getting trapped between learning enough of what you need to get a job and be able to do the requirements of a junior engineer and actually getting a job at a place doing that kind of stuff. Honestly, I kind of feel bad saying this. I say it to a lot of people in real life, and I can see it in their eyes when I get disappointed. So don't feel bad. I'm glad I'm saying it over a video where I can't see your face and your reaction when I say this. But trying to get a job in the tech industry is playing a rigged game. It's designed not to let you in. I don't mean it's rigged in the sense that it's a stolen election or the Russians hacked it. I just mean it's rigged in the sense that it's easier for companies not to hire you as a junior engineer or junior developer or junior designer or whatever you want to be doing. Why? Why is it so hard to get into tech? Well, two big reasons. One, companies suck at hiring. Two, companies aren't looking to hire junior talent across the board. Let's start with the first thing. I work at a company, Stack Overflow, with a job board for the developers that use our platform. One of the really annoying things that happens when someone posts a job listing that doesn't get a lot of love and comes to us asking for help reaching the developers is I look at it and let's say, I'm not making this up, this actually happened last month. Let's say that it's a company looking to hire an Android developer, mid to senior level. That's exactly the kind of person I am. I've been making Android applications for the last 8 years, and I've been making everything else under the face of this time. When I look at that company's job listing, I see that they're not talking about what their Android apps are. They're not talking about who their apps are made for. They're not talking about what the apps use. It's the most bland, boring, non-descriptive description of what a developer does. So I tell them, hey, you should add in some specifics. What kind of Android libraries are you using? What version of Android is the minimum required version that you are targeting? How many people are on your staff? Is there a link to this app? How do I get excited about your company while looking at your job listing? After I give that feedback to a lot of companies, some respond, some do their best, some say, sorry, the CTO wrote the job listing, I'll go back to him and ask him for more details. But some people, and it's people that really anger me, simply say, why? Why should I listen to you? Well, if you're paying to post the product and you're asking why no one's reading, and the kind of person who's your exact target audience is telling you why you're not reading, is it really wise to ignore my feedback? So, if that's the kind of companies we're dealing with, you have to believe me on the first point. People suck at hiring in tech. The second point really pains me to say, but it is very valid. Companies have limited budgets, they have limited runway, they have limited amount of time left in the bank. So when they want to hire a new employee, they're typically looking to replace someone who's left, or they're looking to hire someone who can give them a lot of use of their money. When I say companies don't want to hire junior engineers, what do I mean? I define junior talent as someone who can't do the tasks of the day-to-day of the job all on their own. That doesn't mean they can't do anything on their own. It just means that if I were to assign them 5 tasks to do of some order of magnitude, I would expect the need to answer some questions or give them some guidance on how to do a couple of those things. I can't just expect them to look at a broad list of questions and say, I got this, I know what to do, let me do this right now. There are companies that do hire junior engineers, but obviously, if they're dealing with a bigger, wider talent pool and they're deciding to hire junior engineers, they're doing it for a reason. They're either doing it because they can pay the junior engineer less talent. They're doing it because they want to spend time investing in training talent. That one doesn't happen that much, but it is like, that does exist. One of the first things I do when I meet someone who says they're having trouble getting a job in tech is work on qualifying where they're actually having trouble. There's a bunch of different facets that build into this problem we're working on. And it includes things like, how is your actual coding experience? Have you worked with more than one framework or language? When someone asks you how to do something with an MVC framework, do you say, in Ruby on Rails we blah blah blah? Or do you say, oh, in other MVC frameworks I've used, we do this? Can you abstract things you've learned from one thing onto other things? Because that's most of what programming is. One of the other things I work people through is how quickly they can work under pressure. Hopefully working under pressure isn't something that you're actually dealing with a lot on your day-to-day. If you are, you're at a bad company. But a lot of times in interviews, it's high anxiety, high pressure situations, so you need to be able to communicate what you're thinking out loud while someone is watching you. I actually do mock interviews with my friends over Google Hangouts, and we write in a shared screen where I can see what they're writing, and it's the exact same thing as when I'm doing a code screen for my job. Okay, let's say we've gone through all of the gauntlet, we've decided you do have the skill set ready to become a junior engineer or whatever you want to be. How do you actually get started? Obviously, the first thing you need to do is sourcing. You need to source people to apply to, places to email, people to reach out to. The sourcing can be done a bunch of different ways. There's a bunch of different websites to help you through that process. There's a bunch of different advertising sites where you can put your own face and whatever. But they typically go in hierarchy of the kind of company you're talking to. The hierarchy goes from easiest to join to hardest to join. Contracting or self-employment. You know what contracting is. Basically going out to people and asking them, hey, would you pay me this much money to do this thing? A lot of what you're focusing on in that world isn't the actual programming or the designing or the context-specific things you want to get better at. A lot of it is dealing with the sales and the business and the marketing aspects. If that's something you want to focus on, that's totally okay. I have friends who make a lot of money contracting. The next easiest to get into kind of company is an agency. An agency is basically an abstracted version of a contracting company where you are focusing on the thing you want to focus on, programming or design or whatever it is, and you aren't going out and dealing with clients to find the clients, find new people to pay you. You're not dealing with the invoicing and all of the aspects of contracting that really suck. Outside of agencies, it becomes really difficult to enter the actual scene. You're typically looking at a real company, a tech startup. Tech startups go into a couple different organizations, so I'll separate them by the number of employees they have. There's companies that are less than 5 people. A lot of these are really good companies, but you need to be really wary of first-time founders. Someone who doesn't know what they're doing, doesn't understand what a CFO is, doesn't understand what a COO is, and is just trying to make an idea, can really burn you. One thing to really keep in mind at small companies is that stock in a private company, or worse, stock options in a private company, is worse than worthless. You want to get money. You just paid a lot of money for a degree, you just paid a lot of money for whatever you bought, you need to pay off your debts. Get money, do not take anything that gives you high stock for low salary. Outside of small 1 or 2 person startups, you start getting into the 5 or 10 person space, which is where someone has raised some money, they have an idea, they've made something, they're trying to actually make the implementation that they raised the money off of. Those kind of companies can be really fun because you get to wear a lot of hats. As an engineer, you get to care about user growth and user retention and also whatever else is happening. Just because you're in the room, you're part of the conversation. The next level of startup is companies that are 50 people to 100 or 200 people. These are companies that have gotten Series A, Series B funding, the first few rounds of funding. They have proven an idea. They are trying to figure out if they have a gear that they can tweak into making money or into doing something else. And that is a really fun place to be. It's a stable job in the sense that you actually are guaranteed you're going to get money all the time, because if the company has a lot of money in the bank and they're trying to prove something, they can pay the salary. The nice thing about companies that are bigger than 50 people or so is that if there's also a lot of grown-ups, there are people that need to go home to take care of their kids or their families. Once the default starts being leaving at 5 p.m., it's really easy for you to leave at 5 p.m. Outside of companies that are between 50 and 200 people, you start talking about bigger companies. There are some bigger companies that function as startups within bigger companies, like I know Spotify and Etsy are a little bit like that, where you're on a team doing something and you're dealing with a close-knit group of people, but you are dealing in a greater scheme. The bigger ones obviously are Google, Facebook, which pay the most, but they're the hardest to get into. I only know a couple people that aren't white that have ever interviewed with Facebook or Google. When you're interviewing with a company, they're typically trying to figure out one of 3 things. It depends on what the company is looking for. There are interviews where the company is giving you a very specific question and they're looking for a very specific answer. You don't want to work at those companies. They're idiots. There are places where they are giving you questions and checking that in real time you can apply data concepts or structures or algorithms you should know to the answer. This is typically a company like Google or Microsoft or Facebook, or a startup that has read a book that talks about how they interview. These kinds of interviews where you're being challenged on algorithms or data structures can be really trained. The book Cracking the Interviews goes through a lot of these one by one. The last kind of company is looking to check if you are smart and get things done. That's the kind of company that follows the ethos of my boss, or the kind of companies that follow the same ethos that's in the ether. Our kinds of interviews are in no way questions where you need to know the answer. Our interviews are more like, I'll talk to you about a function in the C programming language. I'll explain every single thing that it does and give you examples of what you could pass into the function and what the outputs would be. You and I then write the function together. An example of an interview like this is when the entire interview is you being given someone's laptop and they give you a programming language that's not listed on your resume and they don't know either, and they say, okay, let's make this really simple application using this language neither of us know. Those are the kind of interviews that I personally like the most, but they might be daunting to junior engineers. Luckily, you won't see them a lot. Most of the interviews you'll attend are interviews where they're asking you a question and looking for your ability to detect the best way of solving it. These are really easy. One, this is a very specific problem that requires a very specific muscle that can be trained in isolation. That means that working on interviews helps you get better at interviews. That means you should try to interview with as many places as you can and don't worry about getting rejected. I tell all of my friends to interview to a lot of financial tech companies. I would never recommend they work at a fintech company. But if you interview with 3 of them and they all list Clojure as one of the languages they use, that gives you one piece of context that you can use in future interviews. When someone mentions Clojure, you can say, oh, I know they use that in fintech. Boom, you already started doing associations, you know more than you already did. Not only does interviewing help you train the actual act of doing the interview, and you can start detecting kinds of problems when someone asks it to you in one interview and again the next week in a different company's interview, it actually helps you get better at learning about the ecosystem of technology because you're getting exposed into buzzwords everywhere. It really depends on your mood, your psychological attitude, and your astrological sign. But a common pitfall is for people to take rejections in interviews really personally. Just because one white guy somewhere in a conference room didn't like you does not mean that no one will ever hire you. You have to be okay with hearing no's. You have to be okay with not hearing anything at all. Because honestly, they're interviewing a lot of people and they don't have the time to get back to you personally. The tech interview itself is a very specific kind of challenge. You need to focus on being able to beat the interview, not on proving that you're a good engineer. No one is testing for that anyway. They're testing to see how you handle the interview. Because so many new people are entering the tech scene every day, there's a lot you need to do to actually differentiate yourself. That means if you don't have a lot of work experience, you need to figure out some other way to target yourself as a specific person that can cater to a need. I don't mean working on side projects. Working on side projects when you don't have a real job is the biggest waste of time. Not only will they not make you money, no one cares about your side project. When someone looks at your GitHub to see if you're doing anything, they want to see what you've done and if it actually works. Companies are looking for people who can scale applications and servers. They're not looking for people who can start random side projects and abandon them. If you are looking to get a job in the tech industry, do not work on a side project. Focus on interviewing. Do interviews with people you don't like. Read about tech. Read about MVC. Read about application life cycles. But do not focus on side projects. Don't make side projects hoping to get a job. Make side projects to learn new languages, to learn new frameworks, to try to do things you wish you could do or you dreamt of, but do not do side projects hoping to get a new job. If you cycle in this fun thing you're working on with the contempt of no one wanting to hire you, you'll start hating something that you should only be working on when you're energetic and excited about it. Don't do side projects to help you get a job. Okay, so to recap. If you know the basics but you want to get a job in tech, first, you need to make sure you know how to interview. That means you know how to handle the basic questions that you know will come up. You can get a list of these at books like Cracking the Code, or you can go through problems that require data structures and algorithms to solve them at things like Advent of Code. I'll link all of those below. Your number one focus should be attaining real-life work experience. Outside of focusing on interviewing and your technical skills, when you interview with more people, you should be asking them questions about how they work at the company that you're talking to. You should be getting feelings for how they feel, how they work, how they get stressed, so that you can figure out what kind of company you want to work at. It's a very personal, unique situation for every single person. The number one motivating factor for every individual is not salary. Some people want a 40-hour job. Some people want jobs that let them out half day on Friday. You need to figure out what you care about and try to get a job that helps you do that. So yeah, that's all I got. If you know that you know the basics enough to program, focus on interviewing. Interview with as many people as you can. If you don't know where to look, come find me. I'll help you figure out what kind of companies to talk to. But the roles do exist out there. You can get a job at a non-awful company as a junior, whatever you want to be. All right? Good luck.